What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another weekly news video. I've been MIA for about the last 4 or 5 days and went away for the long weekend here in Sydney with my wife. I've got the baby coming in just under or just over a week, I should say. So we thought it'd be good to do one last hurrah. Did some fishing, ripped some packs. I was out on the kayak fishing, so you might see some content around that in a few days' time. But I thought, the first video back would be good to do a recap on some of these stories that have popped off, and we'll cover PSA and the grading notes, PSA and some of these cleaning stances. We'll touch on, the whole Tom Brady signing mess that basically went down that I think is completely unacceptable. I'll then also share my thoughts on Darren Rovell and Cllct, because I think his response to this story is maybe a clear indication as to why, his platform might not be as good as what people are making out, why some of these stories are going to be watered down and not give you the true lens on what's going on, within news, within this space. So, I'll share my thoughts on all those things. Just bear with me. And as always, share your comments down below. Now, the first thing we'll touch on is this Tom Brady incident. And as you can see on screen, it relates to him signing things extremely poorly and actually damaging some really expensive, game use memorabilia and really expensive and rare items. And it relates to a sort of conference that went down in Miami. Now, I recorded something on this about 7 days ago, I think it was. I didn't release it because I wasn't happy with the video then, because like I said, I went away for the long weekend. I didn't have time to re-record. But what it essentially was, a conference where Tom was basically presenting and talking about things from a leadership perspective, right? It was there for, business related things and sort of to get some insight into him as a person and sort of what lessons you can be, taking from him from a business perspective, i.e. how he's approached his on-field performances, how he's done things outside, all that kind of thing, right? Typically talks like that are around, leadership and stuff like that, which is what this was for. Now, these VIP tickets for this event were $3,600 USD, and sort of what went down was not good, right? Basically, this $3,600 USD event pass included, you getting an item signed if you wanted to. Now, some of these were mailed in, some of these were taken in person, but apparently when it came to signing these things, Tom was not happy with what was going down. He basically said that he shouldn't be signing these certain things. There should be stipulations. Some stuff should not be allowed to be signed, all this sort of stuff. And it came down to the fact that he was a Fanatics exclusive athlete, as we do well know, and that he should not be signing anything that relates to sports memorabilia, right? Because that's part of his Fanatics contract. Now, where this gets confusing is there was no stipulations communicated prior to this event happening, right? All the comments you'll see from the person running the event, and I might put some things up on screen if I remember, basically highlight that, you can get anything signed. Bring something with you, you can get it signed, right? There was no caveats, there was nothing. Now, on the day, Tom clearly has a different viewpoint, and he basically said he wasn't going to sign certain things. And then, to make matters worse, the stuff that he did sign ended up looking like this, where you can clearly, see that this does not look like a Tom Brady auto, and he's signed some really, rare things that, can't be fixed, right? Because this is a game-used ball. I can't recall what game-used ball this is, but it's an important one for Tom Brady, if I remember correctly. So if this person wanted to wipe down this autograph and remove it, you're basically now damaging a game-used item that might make it difficult to photo match, as Darren Rovell does talk to in his article. So it's a pretty piss-poor, situation. Number one, from Tom and his team, clearly not communicating things beforehand. Some of you guys might say, well, how do we know this, person running the event didn't communicate this? Well, I will say this. Maybe 2 or 3 months ago, Tom Brady did an event here in Australia with Tyson Beck, and he was meant to sign some trading cards. There was nothing in place beforehand on that either, right? He got to the show and said, you know what, I can't sign this stuff. So it's 2 examples now of Tom getting to an event and his team clearly miscommunicating things to people. And when you see 2 things, that starts to be, a trend in my opinion. So it's completely unacceptable, number one, that would happen. But number 2, even though this stuff should not be signed, why would you go ahead and sign it as piss poor as this? Like, it's completely, unacceptable. Some of this stuff costs tens of thousands of dollars. So why are you signing stuff like this? Tom, if it was that big of a deal, for you to not be able to sign this stuff, don't sign anything. Like, if you're going to make the time for your fans to sign stuff, approach it with some respect, right? Don't do it half-assed like this. And it's not, a new thing for some athletes, right? Some athletes do this stuff all the time, and it's a really shitty thing, especially when you're talking about, how important some of this stuff is. And I want to get your thoughts on that, because there's a lot of people that have come out and blamed the promoter first and foremost when, obviously the promoter could have done due diligence beforehand. But like I said, the Tyson Beck situation was exactly the same. Nothing was communicated beforehand until the day of. Again, the day of the event, Tom is now all of a sudden changing his mind about what he can and can't do. It's like, if it's important, communicate that beforehand. And like I just touched on, don't sign like shit, mate. Like, you've ruined these things. People have paid a fortune. At least say, okay, guys, you've done the event. You've listened to hear me speak. I'm going to give you a discount. I'm going to refund your money, right? I'm not going to ruin your memorabilia. I can't sign it for this reason. Don't, double down and say, well, I am going to sign it and then sort of ruin shit. And that sort of goes to where my thoughts are with Darren Revell on this whole situation, because in this video over here, he sort of tries to cut Brady some slack. He sort of puts all the blame on the promoter, and towards the end, he sort of implies, well, yeah, well, maybe Brady could have done better too. It's like, well, no, the whole onus here sits with Brady, and this is where the problem comes to Cllct Media, in my opinion, because this is a media brand for the hobby that Darren Revell has started. I think they generated a few $1 million in startup funding and all that kind of stuff to bring this and uplift and sort of be the focal point for news. But as you can sort of see from my comment here, it's like, well, how are you blaming anyone other than Brady, right? He didn't have to sign. And the fact that you've got Darren sort of making that statement, it sort of implies to me that this guy is trying to save face with Tom Brady. Now, this guy has connections with Tom. He's done a lot of sports reporting in the past. He's, a bit of a top dog when it comes to that kind of stuff. So clearly you've got a bit of bias here coming into it, because you can't look at this situation and blame, anyone other than Brady, in my opinion. Yes, you can blame the promoter for maybe him not doing enough due diligence, but equal blame should go to Tom, because he shouldn't have done this, right? You can't cut him any slack here. So the fact that you've got this, media outlet that many people are sort of promoting, including the likes of Patrick Ryan, who has come out and said he's invested in it, is a bit disappointing, because this is a clear line in the sand, in my opinion. But we should be saying to Cllct Media, well, you've come here and you're meant to be promoting stuff and talking about the hobby in this lens and giving us some, unbiased opinions, but you've gone too easy here on Tom. And is this a sign of things to come, potentially? Are we going to see more bias enter some of these other stories that are being written or not written by this platform? I understand they've got relationships to manage and all that kind of stuff, but, there's nothing wrong with saying to Tom, mate, you fucked up, right? There's nothing wrong with saying that to him. And if Tom's going to get offended by somebody saying that to him, then he's an idiot. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he can sort of be, critical of Tom and also be friendly with Tom, right? It doesn't have to work like that. So the fact that you've got this story written the way it is very disappointing. And then you go, it's the first Super Bowl touchdown ball between Brady and Gronk, is what the caption just said there. So that's my thoughts on the Brady situation. That's my thoughts on, Darren Revell and Cllct Media. You guys can share your thoughts on that one down below. But I just think that's a really shitty situation from Brady to sign the stuff the way he did, and then to have Cllct Media sort of defend him a little bit to try and save face, or at least it looks like to me, is pretty piss poor, in my opinion, is maybe, a sign of things to come as well. Now, the other two topics I want to touch on today relate to an interview Jeff Wilson did with Ryan Hodge, who is the PSA president, and they relate to card cleaning and also graders notes. I'll touch on graders notes first, because I think this one's pretty, important. And I've touched on this many times. Coming from a comic book collector's perspective, I always found it odd how we didn't have notes in the sports card space. And if you're not sure what graders notes are, it's essentially all the information that the grader has documented when they've assessed your card. So if your card got a 9, they'll document why it didn't get a 10. Or if it got a 6, they'll say, well, it didn't get a 6 for this reason. There's an issue here. So if you're somebody looking to buy a card, or you've got a card back from them and you want to know why it got that grade, the grader's notes are going to give you some insight as to why it actually got that right. It's going to give you some comfort as to whether or not PSA made a mistake or not. Because more often than not, you'll see a card come back and you'll be like, why did it get a 6? Or why did it get a 7? I can't see anything wrong with it. Now, sometimes these graders do make mistakes and they put the wrong grade on there, but if you get graders notes and say, and they say, oh, this corner's damaged, and then you're looking and say, okay, it is damaged, then that's the substance you're going to start getting from these graders notes. And it's been a thing from a comic book perspective for a long time. CGC used to charge for them. It's now free. And I think it gives a lot more comfort to prospective buyers. And, it's really important for comic books, because obviously there's more than just a front and back of like a card. You've got pages and all that kind of thing, stamps, coupons that can be removed, all that stuff. So the fact that, you can get them and get that insight makes it really valuable. And I think stuff like this is not only going to benefit people grading their PC cards, but if you're somebody that's actively, buying PSA slabs as an example, it's now going to help you differentiate better between 10s, because some of these cards have huge pop reports when it comes to 10s. No two 10s are the same, but you now might be able to target ones that are, actually perfect, because you can get some 10s from PSA that do have, some flaws, be it surface, corner, edges, whatever, right? There's going to be some, some flaws on there most of the time. So this is going to help place more premiums on certain cards, in my opinion. And I think for that reason and that reason alone, I think it's a pretty big game changer, and I'm keen to hear what you guys have to say. Now, they didn't really give a timeline. I think they said later this year or within the next 12 months. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But I think it's going to be something that all the other graders follow suit. I think we're going to see SGC naturally do this, because they are both owned by the same parent company, and then also BGS and CGC. I think it's an important thing. I'm shocked that CGC weren't the first to market with this, but I think it's a really cool thing. And we sort of live in the data age, right? It's the information age. So we as, collectors, buyers, hobbyists, purists, whatever it is that you are, can now get access to this information to be more informed, I think is a good thing. And I think it's something that we should all be quite, excited about. Now, the other thing I want to touch on from this interview is pretty interesting, and it relates again to something we touched on a week ago when, PSA decertified, the cards from Cllct Card Care, because what Ryan talks to in this same interview was the fact that they're doing a few things. They're going to start potentially marking these cards as altered. They're come out and said, like I've talked to for many months, and I'm curious as to whether Ryan actually watched my video or not, because he does follow me, but he referenced a few talking points of mine around liability and stains returning and all that kind of stuff, because he came out and said they've seen evidence of stains returning. They're concerned about what this means on their grading guarantee, because they are liable if stuff is used on a card, it gets put into a slab, and then the card gets damaged over time. Their guarantee means they're liable because the card no longer matches the grade and all that kind of stuff. So it's sort of an interesting, conversation that you guys should, check out, even though it does involve Jeff Wilson, unfortunately, because as always, he doesn't ask, tough questions. But they sort of basically said, like I just alluded to, they're going to maybe start marking these as altered, and they're also working on a few detection methods to more accurately spot this kind of stuff. Because if you guys will recall, when we spoke about this a week ago, I essentially said that it's ridiculous that PSA have, tried to target Cllct here, and they've done the right thing per their policy, but they had to rely on, evidence being shared to them from the community with videos showing the card being soaked and all that sort of stuff. And I mentioned that was a bit ridiculous how PSA would do that, but then not, decertify the Wemby 1/1 when the person shouted it out. Now, I mentioned that they're sort of a business that's meant to have this credibility. They're sitting on a pillar. They're meant to be the best of the graders and all that kind of stuff. And they've got somebody essentially mocking them in their own office saying, yes, shout out to Cllct Card Care. Now, yes, you don't know what was used, but them as a business needs to maintain a certain level of integrity. And part of that conversation that we spoke to last time was all those things, plus the fact that you're sort of going after Cllct, but not going after anybody else, because you can't actually detect it as a business. So it was sort of good to hear Ryan talk about detection methods, because that's something they need to be actively doing. My stance has always been that I don't like this stuff. I want disclosure, but then the same criticism goes back to PSA. You've got this in your policy. You can't spot it. So why are you trying to police it half-assed? You either go all in or don't do it at all. And they're sort of doing it half-assed at the moment. Now, yes, it is technically better than doing nothing, but you guys get the general gist of what I'm trying to say here. They need to be doing more, and it sounds like they're working towards that. So keen to hear what you guys have to say on any of the 4 topics, as I did mention, but I just thought, that was pretty interesting from Brian to come out with those 2 statements. Graders notes is a big deal, and also being able to spot this stuff is also a big deal. So I'm curious to see what they're working on and whether it's something that can actually work, whether or not they're actually spending enough time looking at cards to actually apply these detection methods, and whether or not they might get some false positives. Are they going to all of a sudden start saying certain cards are altered when in reality they weren't, right? How robust is this detection method going to be? Is it something they can actively, get right 99% of the time? Because if you can't get it to that level of confidence, again, it's a bit risky to be trying to use, in my opinion. So, share your thoughts down below. I'll quickly touch on the Brady situation. Again, those autos sucked, and it was just a bit disappointing to see Darren Ravel try and cut him some slack. It's not what you want to see from a media company, in my opinion. Yes, they've got relationships to manage, but guys, you can be critical of Brady, like I said, without, trying to be his mate at the same time. Like, you can be hypercritical to people, and I think most people respect that, right? If you've got a friend and they're doing something wrong and you say it to their face, they should respect you, right? If you've got somebody that doesn't like what you've said to them and what you've said to them is the truth, then they're not worth your time, right? Honesty is the best policy, and that's how you help yourself and your mates get better. So it's just a bit strange to me, but I'm rambling now. As always, share your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.